Amen. Oh, this is nice and cold.
Yeah. Just like outside.
I'm just sitting myself up here. I do not want to listen to what you guys say. Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
How are you doing? Is everything okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Hey. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to call the Manitowoc Public School District Finance and Budget meeting to order. It is 5:31 on November 16th, and we will start with our donations. And so Angela will speak to that.
Yes, we just had a donation of some iPads for the Strength and Speed program at Lincoln High School. A very generous donation from Bank First. So I understand that the athletes, as they use or participate in the Strength and Speed program in the weight room at Lincoln High School, that they use that equipment just to track progress or to monitor and work with what they do. So just bringing that donation formally to the board because it's over the $2,000 amount. So I'm just looking for approval from the committee to move that forward to the full board.
Okay, I seek motion.
Second.
You be
Oh,
first.
motion.
I'll second. Motion carries. The donation from Bank First from the iPads will go to the full board. Thank you.
Okay, let me just catch up with one thing real quick here.
Absolutely.
I apologize for being,
It's okay.
so make sure I note this properly on my side. And we're at 5:31, I believe
Yep.
Because of and then you had the first, Tony, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then, okay.
Okay, then our next point is we are talking about the MPSD Foundation updates. So it's just information and discussion.
Yeah, I included just kind of a document that outlines the drafted and updated sort of proposal of process for working between the Manitowoc Public School District Foundation and the district. One of the needs just since my time in the district and overall was to make a more streamlined, clear process for when we get contacted about various projects. So we had the executive board meet with the MPSD executive board and just really looking forward to working together as organizations. And some of the things in the business office, we have like a dedicated email address and phone line to kind of route those requests and stuff to Joy Stuckman, who kind of is the secretary for the foundation, and myself. And so we're just continuing to work with the foundation and our board, of course, to see where we can or just sort of solidify that process. So overall, the point is that one of the recommendations that came through was that we consider increasing the threshold where we have to bring donations to the board for formal approval. A process is needed for sure, and I think we're really close. I put some very small updates in there, and I ran them by Ken. He works with the foundation too, just as far as how we're going to formally make that process. But I just wanted to see if the board was interested in increasing that donation amount to $5,000 instead of $2,000. So just kind of wanted to bring it for discussion.
Okay. Do you have any comments or anyone?
Does that mean that if we get 5,000 or that what we would do with it, or help me understand the?
So if someone brings if someone brings a donation to they have an idea for something that they'd like to have done, and if the value is over $2,000 currently, the board has to formally accept that before we're able to really take possession of that donation. So while most cases the board would likely approve any donations, it's just one of those things where someone could want to, for example, donate something to the district that requires a large amount of maintenance. And we would say, well, that's really gracious. However, that will not work for us, or, so those are the types of considerations we need to take into, just take into the big picture. One of the things, they mentioned the liability of the maintenance of the donation and that kind of stuff in the policy. So, the thought is that the policy hasn't been updated in over 10 years, so that amount is kind of low because of prices. We do have a letter that we offer when people donate stuff for between, over $250. I one or two times I've had a request to give that letter out if people want to use it for tax purposes. So I guess I just, kind of planting the seed and seeing where the committee's thought was on that.
So do we know what's customary, I guess, in other districts, or?
I have not looked at what other districts have, and I can before I would bring the revised, the potential policy for approval. I'm guessing it is around, I think Sheboygan is 2,500, I know that. And then anything over 500, I think becomes recognized. So I think it's, it wouldn't be much larger than that, but I can for sure look into that.
So what would be the downside in doing that?
You could have something that would be donated to the district for under that amount that could, have a large amount of maintenance, but that would be highly unlikely. So most things that are going to come to the district that would need, be like a true concern of the district would be of a higher value. So I think that would be comfortable with that. So I think sometimes, on the side of the foundation, one of their thoughts is that we have a lot of donations come in for larger amounts, and it would minimize having everything come, just having a more steady stream of donation, just to kind of say, if it's under $5,000, we don't need to hear it, but if it's over, we would. So.
When we had a meeting with them, Tony, one of the things that they talked about was like the ease of making a donation, that especially when it comes to financial, if we're talking about dollars, we want to be able to accept those dollars without making it difficult for the one who wants to give.
Right.
So, because of course we're happy to take in funds at the district. So that was part of what they were talking about too.
Yeah. I unless, I don't know, Jim, do you have any thoughts to add to that at all? I really think that 98% of the time, we're not going to have a concern with a donation. It's really to make sure it's vetted properly, just in case there would be something we need to consider.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect myself not to that amount.
Sure. Yeah, I don't see why we wouldn't do it then. Maybe just make sure you guys review it for any total cost of ownership considerations, if that comes into play, but.
I think either way, there would be where Jim and I would be looped in, what's being proposed and what was in the memos. Jim and I would be looped in along with the president of the foundation and the vice president treasurer, so that it just would kind of be like everyone could be looped in. We could include the board president if you would like to be as well. It's just a means to just vet it to make sure it's just not automatically being taken in, and then if it would hit that threshold, we would bring it to the board for official approval.
Yeah, you'd want to be able to bring resources in, particularly at those lower amounts that, you're really wanting to help. But on the other hand, you want to always be careful of any implications or something that's going contrary to whatever intent you might have. So if something's taken in an opposite direction, you don't want to necessarily just have that as an avenue that brings in something and it's going against something that we're attempting to do. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to have something that's aligned with just getting additional support for the work that we're doing.
I would think what it's going to be used for, what the donor intends it to be used for, would be more of an issue than the amount.
Right.
Which will be in the policy, right?
Yeah, and either way, a donation, we should, it should be vetted out, it just kind of that it becomes brought to the board, so someone could say, I use my fun example is like, I want to plant 3 evergreen trees in front of Abe Lincoln, And right now I'd be like, well, those aren't blocking aid, but then all of a sudden 25 years from now, those would. So we would say, well, that's really generous and thank you. However, is there something else we could do with it or some other type of donation? And it's just a conversation starter.
Sure.
If there's a concern, we are always grateful for donations to the district, of course.
Yeah, I personally don't have a problem with it. Obviously, it's policy, so we'll have to start addressing that particular policy. And I think it was 2010 was the last time that was addressed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I can bring, I need to touch base on with a couple of, there's some policy work that we need to dig into, just minor policy revisions, purchasing policy, food service, and this donation policy, we can start bringing that next month. So it's really a very, very simple revision. I can share the template with Colin and in preparation for the meeting and the committee. Other than the amount, I don't see a need for other revisions, but there may be other options in the template to consider.
All right, any other information or discussion to be had? No? Okay, then I think then we can move on to your business office updates.
Okay, yes, I had several business office updates within board book. So make sure I had a lot of memos attached this time here. Sorry, lots of information. All good information. So just basic updates. We have audit wrap up. That's, we're finishing that in the next 1 to 2 weeks, just general activity. Some of the main pieces, we had that actuarial study. The board approved that we had key benefits concepts complete that for us. They did a very nice job on it. I met with them and had them do a full review of the actuarial study. I'll bring that and attach that in board book and share that with everyone for the December meeting. And that just goes over with their current employees, their current benefits, what that cost is projecting out to the district in the future. We do a lot of reporting behind the scenes, and sometimes it seems kind of random, but I thought it'd be fun to show you kind of the things that we will do, like non-discrimination testing for benefits, equal opportunity employer reporting, updating rates for long-term disabilities, short-term disability, prescription plan reporting, ACA reporting, are things that we're all working on updating records for. That's just kind of the standard activities that we do behind the scenes. And just wanted to share that. Cash reconciliation is another one too, where we have some additional reporting to do that over time. It's just, there's been some challenges with our accounting or our financial software systems and just getting up to speed with load of work in the business office. So we're working through some of that additional reporting, but that's on track. And then benefits open enrollments, that went well. We're very, very happy with how that's coming along. And a lot of people took advantage of the option to do the high deductible health plan. And we're still kind of going through and making sure everyone turned in forms. So I'll be able to provide more hard numbers as far as what the enrollments are for the 23 year. And then the true test will be going through the year and seeing, how that option plays out for us. And we hope to see, hope that it'll work and have the anticipated results that we hope it will. So budget preparations are underway, working to do, the challenges that we're going to have, just in preparing the budget, just in general, as I'm looking at staff, how we're going to be advancing staff just with our new system with Skyward. And we have to put everyone on a matrix. And that's one thing I wanted to note for sure and share with you. Right now, everyone, all the teachers, all the staff members are increased in a couple of different ways. We have like a base, longevity, and in some cases for teachers, for example, by education. So right now, as it stands, everyone is within a range, okay? So in some districts, what they do is they have, is what's called a matrix. So you have everyone like on a certain, if you think of like a multiplication table where like I'm starting in B1 and then I move to B2. And if I get more education, I move over to C. And then you kind of work through and the pay is based on that. our new financial system will require us to use a matrix. So what that just means is we have to transition everyone from payments that are not like aligned exactly in this matrix, and we have to just put them on there. So in short, what it'll mean is, like, let's say someone's at, kind of a simple example, you could have a range of $1,000 and have 4 different steps of $250. So you could say, okay, if you fall between this range and this range, we're gonna pull you up to the next level so that you fit into a matrix step. And so it's, when you transition people onto the matrix, you make sure that they don't lose any compensation, but it's just that they're moved into this new process. So, I don't know, it's kind of complicated to understand, but it's just transferring people. Our system right now is really not, it's based just on percentages, but we'll still do that, but it'll fit a little bit more into a more organized chart for how they're increased.
It sounded like the biggest issue with this is gonna be preparing staff, that it's gonna look different, right? How it's
Yes.
rolled out
Correct.
to them, and it'll seem like they're not getting what they want, what they were intended, right? And it's kind of like the increase, and so I think that'll be probably the huge issue to combat.
For example,
To
like
prepare.
I might be making, let me see, let's say I'd be making $45,500. And let's say that's what my salary was brought up to. Well, let's say the next step was $45,550. I would be moved up to the higher amount. I wouldn't be moved down to the lower amount. So it's like we'll do the calculations, but then have to move them onto this matrix. So it's really, it's simple. There are easy ways to do this. I just kind of want to share that. The other thing is the language right now is they think of their steps as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's going to transfer to letters because the steps down are the numbers. So, I mean, it's, getting into the weeds on the details of it, but, we're just going to have to inform them and share that, no one essentially would lose based on, what that is. We would ensure that wouldn't happen. It's just kind of like everyone's all over the place right now, and we have to have everyone sort of be into more categorized steps and lanes. So. Yeah, and then, let me see here, just moving along here. I reached out to, regarding updates from the previous meeting. I talked to Mary Doran at Lincoln High School. She was provided the quote, and we were investigating this potential donation. It turns out it's really a discount, and it was a group from Milwaukee, and I just had mentioned that we wanted to take a look at, just other quotes, because that would be standard with our purchasing policy when we have an opportunity to make, especially a large purchase over $3,000. So I just asked her to reach out for an updated quote, and then some other quotes for some other businesses, so we can see if we want to investigate the opportunity. The compensation studies, we were looking and considering last month, looking at the highly qualified clerical staff that work at the district level. And just in talking with our interim director of human resources, just decided to table that at this point, just to take that into consideration when we look at all employee groups for 23-24. Really at this time of the year, the typical work is that we look at all of our salary schedules, and we look at comparables to other districts, and we look at where we will have needs to make changes for the next school year. So we put that on hold. And then on the next 2 items, property, and I provided a handout that had just an overview of all of the properties. I'm not going to go into that into great length. Really the one property that was in question, we wanted to exhaust, like, are there any opportunities as a board? And the recommendation of the appraiser was, we really don't have any property short of the one on 8th and Columbus, and then potentially our soccer park, which we use for a specific purpose already. Our current properties don't present a great opportunity. The one on Fleetwood, I think, was questioned because that, is a large space. And I was talking to Ken Mishler today, and he said that at one time was purchased to build an elementary school years ago. It's on wetlands though. And then, so that's one thing that, it would be hard to sell and hard to work with that. So, Kevin Raminger, who provided the appraisal or just the evaluation of all the properties, basically said just to mainly stick with we wouldn't have anything that we would really want to pursue unless we don't want to look at the 35th Street property. So, just, in general, if you would like to pursue any of that further, just let me know. Otherwise, you have an overview of our properties at Wilson Middle School is an example. They needed more parking, so they bought 2 buildings at the time, and that parcel of land that is the parking lot now is where those properties used to be. So without hardly any knowledge about land, parcels and how the city records it, it probably has to always stay separate once it's separated out. So, and then the appraisal came in. So I handed that out just before the meeting, and the appraisal came in for the 8th and Columbus property at $4,300. So I reached out to the property owner just before the meeting and wasn't able to get a hold of him. But what I am looking to do is to work to, I knew I was likely not going to have this appraisal in before the meeting. So I was hoping that I could get an approval from the committee to push it ahead to the full board for approval once I was able to work out a selling price. And I'm guessing that the sale would be around, I think he'd offered, I heard this just in conversation that he'd wanted to purchase it for $4,000, which was in line with where the appraisal came in as well. So that was what I was thinking of proposing to him, and then we could have the full board approve it if the committee moves it forward. So I keep on talking a lot of stuff, so I should pause, see if there are any questions.
So if you want to move that forward, though, we don't have it listed for possible action though on our
Do you not have that for action on here?
Just as, unless we have it further down.
I think it's further down.
It's further down?
Yes, the updates from the previous meeting. So I kind of had both the business office updates and the updates from the previous meeting on one memo. So that is on the agenda. It is for possible action though. So we could take action on it if you guys are okay with that.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to bring it before the full board.
Okay, yeah, I'll second that too then. So then motion carries, we'll be taking that to the full board. All right, so next is the Cooper Ranch funds.
Yeah, the Cooper Ranch funds are something that we've had since I want to say 1992, I believe. I'd have to look here. And what we were looking to do is to consider moving the funds from the district's holdings to the MPSD Foundation. And the reason we would do that is the money for the foundation is invested with Lakeshore Community Foundation, and it makes a far larger return. And we could, instead of the funds falling off and essentially running out in the next 7 to 8 years, have them last for a lot longer period of time. So I didn't have this opinion until just the half hour before, so I would bring a formal action next committee meeting.
Okay.
And I just wanted to share that Kate Reynolds had provided the opinion for us, and she worked with the trust in transferring it to the possession of the district in 1997 or 92. She advised the district on it. So since she's still practicing, I just reached out to her to see if she could offer some thoughts on that. So she did not see any problem with it especially if we kept it separate and just made sure it was for the use of the original intent was for acquisition and or maintenance of equipment and supplies which directly benefit the students and further their education. And with the foundation, that's how we handle the funds. We keep them separately so we would be able to accomplish that mission. So I will recommend that to the committee and to the board next in December, that we transfer those funds to the foundation if it's all right. So, yeah, and then we would, just internally, I need to talk with Jim. We've had a variety of ways that we've handled the funds in the past, and there was an allocation for both Washington specifically, because Mr. Cooper was a principal at Washington for several years, and then for the district. But it was like 75% and 25% of the original trust. And so Washington's received essentially if very close to their full percentage of the trust. So then what we would be able to do is just use, once that obligation is met, we would be able to use, just have it be just for use by the full entire district. So that's the update there. And then I had mentioned some updates about Skyward. We continue to work on the implementation with that. It's a lot of work. It's going well. Everyone's working hard, and the support positions in the buildings will be sharing who will be serving in those roles by the end of the week, and to give them access to the training module video, so they're set to support in the buildings once we roll out in January. So I had some
next, I think we are on to depository for district funds, which is something that we have to do every single year.
Mm-hmm.
So that is an actionable item.
Yeah, so the depositories it's just a list of places where we invest money through for the district, and this is just a fairly standard matter. Trying to think here. We really, our main holdings of our district finances are on Bank First National, and then also the state of Wisconsin local government pooled investment fund. Those are the two main places where all of our funds are held. So that's just, but the standard practice has been just to list all the potential ones that we've worked with in the past or could potentially have a partnership with.
I have an odd question with that, Angela. So say, for example, we use Bank First National for the majority of our funds, which I'm sure is more than $250,000. And I know for households, that's the maximum insurance amount that places are insured for.
Yeah.
So what is it different for school districts?
It's trying to think here. They do, like, we
Sorry, I'm probably throwing.
No, you're fine. They are insured under FDIC, and then I think it's because of the volume of money, it might be handled a little bit different. We receive like a collateralized deposit report every day for what is in, what is covered by the bank and what our balances are daily, and so they are all insured. And then there are just times where I want to say maybe almost a year and a half ago, when there was a lot of money within banking just because of how the markets were and bank holdings were, we moved money to like our investment pool, the LGIP account. So usually we're allowed, and it's safe and it's insured all the time. So the rules are a little bit different. I am not really well versed on that. So
Okay. I'm just curious. Maybe I'll look into that too myself. So,
yeah.
Okay. Right. With that, is there? I guess we need approval then of who we're using and where, what businesses we're using to deposit our funds. So I seek approval for that as a motion. Are there any other? I'm gonna make motion, then we can have discussion.
So, yeah, I'm just trying to process this then. Do we evaluate them for interest rates and stuff to see who's gonna give us the best, or how do you?
No, that's a good question. We've been with Bank First National for a very, very long time. I'm not sure how long exactly. We've been approached and we have one CD that's for a special fund that's truly invested outside of our regular that is more actively invested. And we've been approached by other banks to move money, and we can look at that at points. One thing that was, we've had someone, like I think Nicolay Bank said, like, hey, if you'd like to look at what we offer, we get that often, from lots of vendors. And so at the time I just said, because we have the Skyward conversion coming, we can't change our banking right now because that would be an extremely large process. But we haven't lately like actively looked at it, but there are always those options. So.
Yeah, I would think that might be a useful exercise, just given how much money we have, in the account. I know that fluctuates throughout the year, but.
Yeah.
I would imagine if we can get a better rate, that might be several $1,000s that we can just get without really doing a whole lot.
Yeah, no, we can certainly look. I would say like in the next year, we could definitely take a look at that. I'd be willing to shop around a little bit and see. I mean, we get outstanding service from Bank First National. I'm not concerned, but it's always good to look and see and either affirm that you're happy with what you have or see if there are other options. So.
Okay, so I seek a motion to pass the depositories for district funds.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. Do we even say all in favor, say aye? It's just the two of us. Motion passes. Thank you.
Makes it easy for
It seems silly to say all in favor when we just spoke for the two who made motion. Okay, the next then we're on to the City of Manitowoc contractual agreements, and this is for information and discussion only.
Yeah, and I just, we have just a discussion about the baseball field and just, other discussions that happened internally. Jim and I were talking, and we have several, it's just good for you guys to know, we have several agreements with the City of Manitowoc, and they're very nice partnership agreements. Some of them, we have the Manti Health and Wellness Clinic. I'll come back to that in a little bit, but, they're just informal agreements. And I asked Chris to pray maybe to look into he gave an example of like the Fleetwood property. The city will just take care of our sidewalk there. Okay. They also, when they drive up to Lincoln and snowplow, they go around the circle and come around. They've got to turn around. They just do it for us. So it's, there are little things that really technically they wouldn't have to help with, but they do. And we just do that in good faith and we work with each other. They're able to buy we purchase salt and gas from the city too, and they get like a discount on that stuff. And so we are able to take advantage of some of those. And I didn't look into this in great detail, but I know we let them buy like paper products in bulk, and then we just invoice them. So that's kind of like little things. We have the SRO agreement for the school resource officers, and that's very typical in districts to have a shared agreement. That's very, very typical. The transportation agreement, we're in the last year of the transportation agreement, and that's something we're going to have to look into in this next year. So the district paid a substantial amount of money for this transportation agreement. Historically, in the years of COVID, to my knowledge, it wasn't reduced when kids were not riding the bus. So that's a question I have, so often what we received during those times were, discounts for not using services or something. So we never brought it up with the city at the time, but it's something that I think that we would want to look into. The care, so that's something that we'll be revisiting this year because it's expiring, and I think our families, students really benefit from the use of the transportation system, and they just have to have their student ID and they get to ride the bus. So that's the only thing that's necessary. The ball diamond agreements, that's something that there has been agreements in the past for that. I think there were a little more intricate considerations because Municipal Field was in question, the ownership of that at the time. And then I'm just gonna say a little bit more about the Manti Health and Wellness Clinic. It started in 2016, and the original agreement was a 25%, 75% split. And I think it sounded like when we've looked at data recently that over time when they looked at the usage and they looked at that data and they adjusted it for the use, that we ended up paying maybe a little bit less and the city a little bit more. When we were considering the clinic change, when we went out to bid, we were not happy with Aurora, and we had the options between Holy Family, Freighter, and Prevea. And the district could have gone with Prevea. It would have been a cheaper amount. But the city couldn't go to Prevea. They could only go to Holy Family at the time because of their network, and that still happens to be the case. And so what ended up happening was, in the interest of sticking together in a partnership, because we could offer more hours and more time available to employees to utilize the clinic, we decided to stay with Holy Family, or join the city with Holy Family Freighter, and they agreed to take a little bit larger of a percentage because of that sort of trade-off. So with a lot of turnover in employers, they're experiencing a much lower utilization rate compared to us at this point. So we had this agreement of 42.58% before, but I know that they're looking to amend that for the next year. So I'm just putting that on the table, and we have talks coming up. It's good to have the partnership there. We've had, with our health plan and the clinic, there's been a lot of struggles with sometimes getting information from Holy Family Freighter, especially with return on investment and stuff. And so we're looking for some reports on that. And, we have a 3-year clinic agreement right now. And the one adjustment we did make for next year is we canceled the PT services, because they were like an extra service we paid for, and they were incredibly low utilized. We had like less than 10 people using them in the city as well. So we were able to easily make that decision and felt comfortable with that, because if we didn't cancel them as well, then we would have paid the full amount for those services, as I understand it.
This, in my discussion, with Angela, was recognizing the importance of having our contract agreements in hand, that we really understood the costs associated with this, how this fits into a big picture of service, so that we truly are understanding both cost and return on, any type of an investment that we're making, how we're managing our relationships with the city, because, sometimes there's a lot of handshakes maybe, but to make sure that we understand what the documentation is behind there in terms of what we're really committing to, who's maintaining what, and who's doing, versus I did something here for you, you do something there for me, to just make sure that we have more formal agreements.
Yeah.
Keeps everything honest and, upfront, and that we can really kind of assess the benefits either to the district or staff, or in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, so we'll continue to discuss that. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys have the information in hand as we talk about different agreements. There are a couple agreements in the mix here, so. And it's great to have partnerships there. The city's great to work with. We just have to make sure that we protect our interests as they protect theirs. So.
Okay, thanks, Angela. The next is the spring 2023 operational referendum.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we've got to really start focusing in on this. And, Jim and I have been talking too. We have quite a bit of work on our hands to look at, the salary, staff compensation projections, to see with a couple of different options that we'll want to model out, especially with changes that are sort of, options at this point. And, the main things I wanted to share, just to plant, just to understand where we're at right now, is we have the operational referendum for last year, this year, and next year, okay, for $4.3 million. So we, and when we went to referendum, we knew, the conversation at the time was that they knew that it wasn't enough money, but it was what they felt it was comfortably could pass, okay? And that is a consideration that we need to take into account as well. What will both meet our needs and is reasonable for taxpayers as well. And at that time, the mill rate was around $7.81, and we're at $5.51 right now. So in 2 years, it's dramatically changed. So that's just kind of to set the stage for that. But, really looking at the referendum amounts, we have to look at three main factors: type, time, and amount. Okay, so those are the things that Mike Clark from Baird talked to us about. He talked to us both about the non-recurring, which is our current structure, and recurring operational referendums. So capital referendums we've talked about already, but at this time, August, September, we talked about the fact that we weren't ready to consider that for this round. So our focus is mainly on just the operational referendum. So as a reminder, the non-recurring, which is our current structure, that's just you add that onto your revenue base, but it's not, you have to renew that for a period of when it expires. And then the recurring is permanently built into your revenue limit. But if you have declining enrollment like we do, that amount essentially, it's a per pupil increase amount, and that declines over time. So we would still be increasing it, but it would just, it doesn't have the same lasting value to say. It's one way to look at it. So, and a lot of times recurring referendums are viewed, because you're locked in permanently to that amount, are just harder for people to vote for. They just, they want to be able to come back and revisit, which is fair. So there's, we definitely know that we have need, and we're going to continue to have the need. So in that respect, a recurring referendum and a permanent build on our revenue limit would be wise. But sometimes it's not always viewed that way. So those are just trying to help with some of the considerations that we need to take into consideration. For time, historically, we've done 3-year referendums, and right now we're just into the second year. So we really wouldn't have to go to referendum until next year. But the other part of it is then we could either increase what we have for next year and then have it planned out. But there's the stability in planning when you go right before it runs out. So 2 years ago, we were all kind of like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do if this doesn't pass? So that's really the sort of the feeling of a doomsday within the organization is really unsettling and then not good for the culture with our employees. And so that's one of the main reasons we wanted to this time go for the referendum 2 years in advance. So if for some reason it didn't pass, we'd have another chance to work with that. And hopefully it would pass the first time, but that's up to our voters. The recommendation, many districts are doing longer terms on their operational referendums. So I think one piece that's noted is that voters will get just like a voter fatigue. So, and they'll say, well, we just passed that, why do we have to vote on that again? And so that's where considering a longer term is something that's is notable, because you can minimize that a little bit more. I just put some of the different things to think about. The main consideration when it comes to staffing now is, and why we need more time to work on what our final amount is, that CPI or the WERC, I always forget the acronym here. Getting better at spelling out my acronyms here. The Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission, if you Google them, they put out the rates that are used by districts all over the state. That's the CPI. So to say that we use, I don't know if municipalities use that as well. I think they do. But the rate for May of 2023 is 8.04% right now. And if you look at that, like 2 years ago, the rate was 1.23%. This last year was 4.7, and now it's 8.4. it doesn't appear to be going down. And so, just to kind of place in the back of your mind, the city did about a 5% increase, so did the county. County had a little bit more of a creative way they did theirs, and so some of their employees can experience as much as 7 or 8%. We can't afford that, we can't. But we need to give our employee, we're all facing and dealing with increased costs, as is, all of our employees are, but we have a revenue problem where we only have so much revenue coming in, no additional money per pupil this year, increased costs for what we buy for goods and services, and into the hope to compensate our employees more. So, just to kind of, so that those are big considerations within that. So anytime, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, when you think of your duration of a referendum, you have more unknowns too. So over 10 years, if we would go out 10 years, we don't know what's going to happen to interest rates. We don't know what CPI is going to do. But one of the things that we could consider is we have 4.3 million for next year. We could add on top of that, and that would help with the increased costs for compensation. So we can increase it to be 1.7 million more to 6 million as an example. And I believe the impact on the mill rate would be about 51 cents, I believe, if we would do that much, add that additional on. And then, we would just be more comfortable and able to handle the compensation amounts. We didn't give employees steps this year, but we gave them a 3% increase in the stipend, and the stipend doesn't roll forward, but we still have, an increase that we really didn't get additional funding to support. So it's a big concern. So we're going to continue to work on it. Jim and I have some work sessions that we're going to get planned, and just take a look at all of these, model out different scenarios for what we'll have, and then we'll bring those to the table. I mean, just additional considerations. I mean, the revenue considerations I mentioned, the ESSER funding's falling off. That's a huge piece of that. And then declining enrollment. We won't know what we're going to get from the state. So a comfortable projection is usually $100 to $200 additional per student. And I would imagine in the next 2 months, we'll hear a lot more about the next biennium budget. So, but even as we consider passing a resolution to do the referendum, we won't know anything until spring about the outcomes of that. So it's not like we have to pass that resolution by January 24th. So we're going to have to plan as if we wouldn't get any additional money in many ways. I added some notes about technology. We just, the goal ultimately with my budgeting as I settle more into this position is keeping an eye on ways that we can regularly budget and set aside money for large major purchases and just not be reactionary. And so technology infrastructure is one that's notable because we have money in Fund 46 that's going to take care of the current update, which is going to be about $1.5 million. And we want to be proactive and set money aside so that we're not all of a sudden just taking, $1.5 to $2 million out of a budget on a given year, at the expense of other areas' needs just for technology. But we know we're going to have to make these updates. So as long as we put them in our Fund 46 plan, what we're able to do is we could put a little bit of money aside every year and know that we have that money saved up. And it would gain interest too. So from that perspective, we would know that, that we would maybe need to, it would grow on its own a little bit. So that could help us financially in that way. I mentioned a little bit about our other post-employment benefits. That's an area we need to revisit a little bit as a district and evaluate that program. We want to continue to offer generous benefits post-employment, but going from a guaranteed benefit contribution has major implications financially for the district. And then I would recommend for sure that we consider increasing how much we do for buildings and that we budget for buildings and grounds. Again, to be more proactive instead of reactive. So I'll have more updates on it. I'm happy to answer questions.
So it sounds like you think that we should ask for another $1.7 million, if I'm hearing you right, and you want that basically like another referendum on top of to overlap with the existing one for next year?
Yes, so it'll be an increase of 1.7 to the current amount that we have, and then that amount would carry through. And when it was modeled out, we would increase it maybe $500,000 every 2 years. So we have to, when you file a resolution, it would have to be real clear the dollar amount that we would have in total. You can't say, well, we'll increase it 2% every 2 years. It has to be, $6 million, 6.5 million, that kind of thing.
So how would that work then? I guess, would that just run, because the last year for the current referendum is next year, right?
Correct, yes.
So this $1.7 million one, would that just be for 1 year, or would that be for like,
how it's registered, when we register the tax levy, it might be separate because it's an additional one, and then the one would fall off, and then the next one that would be replaced would just be for the full amount.
Okay.
So it's more of a technical filing piece than anything. So but we do have the ability to add to that, which I would recommend. Even, I would say between 6 and 6.5. So it could be as much as like 2.2 we'd want to add on to there potentially. A lot just hinges on staff increases, that kind of thing too. So we're working hard to get that stuff updated so we can be as prepared as we can going into that. Prepared with lots of unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
It's makes one feel nervous. So. But we want to work to do all we can and be fiscally responsible. So.
Jim, what's your take on that?
Well, again, I think as we're working through this, part of planning is knowing your details.
Yeah.
So it's really understanding, exactly in terms of what we're supporting now, what's our return on that cost, and, moving forward. As I indicated before, I believe we're probably, we're spending a given amount of resource that we have to make sure that we can sustain, knowing that return on that. As we've looked at even, whether or not we're spending too much, do we need to look at it? I don't see that. I don't, the question is whether or not we're spending on the right stuff, to get the return. We've identified, the potential of, are we receiving enough resource relative to making sure that we're holding our own, in terms of what we're being able to provide, in terms of service, in terms of elevating student achievement and the like. So I think that's on the road. But again, I think we need to bring more detail into this conversation. But right now, I believe
6:30. I know we're kidding.
But I believe we are spending the right amount. We just have to be looking in terms of what we're doing and where we're spending it, and if we're getting a return. We talked about the facilities, needing, a long-range plan. We're working towards that. We have some identified needs, so we know we need resources for that. So I think right now is we're playing kind of a conservative role moving forward about sustaining our stuff as we're trying to better understand not only our return, but how to manage and leverage resources so we're not spending more than we have to get the returns that we need.
A lot of times too, where with the technology devices, I didn't mention that, where it's like all of a sudden we'll have an emergency and we have to find money from different pockets and areas. And so I think that's where, being a low spending district, we've had to function in that way. And I think if we can be very clear about what the needs are, have a plan behind it, that can help us, educate and show the community that we're planning ahead. That's very important in my work for the district, and to make sure that we communicate that out. Because I think all budget stakeholders within the district can understand that we're we have systems in place to replace technology and that kind of stuff to meet needs. So, it's not that those systems weren't in place in the past, it's just we're working to really more clearly define them and make them more known.
I don't think there's really anything that we need for action on this, is there? This is just more discussion, and it sounds like you have more to talk about with Jim and so forth, so.
Yeah, I guess my ask for you, Angela, and Jim, as we move forward in this process is, as part of your recommendations, besides the ask for more funding, where might our biggest opportunities lie as far as, reallocation of funding or, getting more value for those dollars as we talked about? Because I definitely want that to be part of the process too. I mean, it sounds like, we're definitely in a situation where we have to rely on these referendums, which is the hole that we're in, unfortunately. But, if in fact we need more money, which is maybe likely, we just want to make sure that we're really evaluating all the spend now and being as prudent as we can.
And our past operation, as I'm making an assessment coming in, it's been a continuation budget, meaning this is what we spent last year, we'll spend it next year.
Yeah.
With sometimes large allocations, recognizing there's a need in there if we're looking at, but it's not necessarily detailed out, to the extent that we really start looking in terms of what we're spending and what options do we have available and what we're choosing to do and the return on that. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, in terms of where we haven't done that. And it's not that we aren't, because again, we're spending within the limits that we have, but we still need to be able to understand the detail behind that and the return on that investment.
Yep. Yeah, we definitely need to move in that direction.
By January 24th.
Okay, I think if we don't have anything else, we can continue moving on. I think that's a continued discussion, obviously, that's going to be ongoing, right? And so the last is the 23-24 budget planning timeline.
Yeah, so, and I don't think I had a specific attachment in here for that, or I had a little bit on the business office updates, but, we talk a lot about the expenditures piece of the budget, but the main starting piece is always the revenues. So like I'm working with updating our budget model, and as I work with Jim too, we have to know first what we're potentially going to bring in, especially with lost revenue with ESSER and declining enrollment. And then with that, what are we going to have to work with for expenditures? And then what is the need, that we need in addition to what we already have. So going to start mainly working on in those areas. And because we have the January timeline, we would really want to pass a resolution for the referendum by the first meeting in January. I think we could potentially do it for the last one, but you have to notice it, and we just don't want to be doing that real last minute. And so we have our work cut out for us. We could just talk next at the December 21st Finance and Budget Committee meeting, but we may want to consider having an additional meeting in there just for that one topic to discuss that. And I don't know, I'll defer and work with Jim on what he recommends for our approach.
We need to come back with a plan. We need to have a, in terms of what are our needs, what is our plan for meeting those needs, how does that lay out? So we really need to come back, with a proposal, and then how does this need base relative to our revenues coming in to fund that? So that we clearly understand, are we going to have to cut back? Are we maintaining? Are we switching around? But, we haven't brought the detail that I believe is needed here, to create that level of understanding of getting that return. Again, just because knowing what our revenues are compared to others, that us already defining your limits in spending, where we're spending within that, but again, it's really understanding. And as we've discussed regarding our performance and reading at, our reading scores and the things that we discuss, clearly something's not working here that we need to understand, and how are we leveraging our resources to get the returns we're looking for. So it's gotta be part of a plan. I think we've been discussing that. All these things really need to merge. No, something doesn't, talking about a budget without understanding that return,
Right.
you know, those things have to go hand in hand. And I think we just need to start bringing more detail, more understanding in terms of what we're attempting to do and how we're getting there.
Just to clarify, you guys may already know this, but we can only go to referendum once a year. And there are certain times that we're not allowed to, like in the fall of a presidential election, we can't go to referendum then. So, the timing is key that we try to go, if we're gonna do this, that we do this this spring, so.
And if a referendum fails, you can't go for another full year.
Right.
So that's where it's, not only do we not have a November election next year, but we also do not have the luxury, I don't wanna say luxury, so to say, to, you need that full year period. If for some reason it doesn't fail, I mean, we feel confident that we can provide the detail on the need but it's in the hands of the voters.
Yep, yeah, I think, just having all of our ducks in a row and showing that we've done all of our due diligence and making the case, I think will make that whole process go more smoothly, so.
With that, what are our future meeting dates?
December 21st is the next date. I mean, Jim and I can work to prepare a detailed plan by that time. And I think that maybe we can just plan to do that at this time. And then if we find we would benefit from another meeting, we can work to arrange something.
And that would be 5:30 again?
Yes.
Okay, so 5:30, December 21st, and then any additional meeting, you'll let us know going
Yes.
forward. Great. Is there anything else? All right, with that, I would like to see a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I will second. It is 6:32 on November 7th, or November 16th. Sorry, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you have a short meeting.
Colin is super sick. So, yeah. I got a text today,
Don't run away.
and he's fine this morning. He thinks maybe it's something